While the world sighed, its eyes fixed on the monumental Operation Overlord and the beaches of Normandy in 1944, an Allied war machine was preparing another strategic move, an intervention that, although less famous, would be equally decisive in the collapse of the Third Reich in France. Far from the cold English Channel, under the bright sun of the French South, a new front was about to open, and in the blue skies of Provence, a particular sound, a powerful and unmistakable roar, foretold an approaching storm, the arrival of a radical change in the domination of the skies. It was the sound of the P-51 Mustangs, not just planes, but the tools that would redefine the concept of air dominance in long-range theaters of operations, and which, during Operation Dragoon, will become the wings of freedom for the south of France. Today, we will unravel the story often relegated to the background, the story of these daring aviators and their deadly war machines, whose actions were fundamental to the liberation of France. Operation Dragoon, originally codenamed Anvil, as a counterpoint to Overlord's Hammer, was finally launched on August 15, 1944. Its strategic purpose was straightforward but complex: to open a significant new front in southern France. The primary objective was to fragment the German defenses, forcing the Wehrmacht High Command to deploy its forces, already under intense pressure in Normandy and Italy, to counter a new threat. This deployment was intended not only to weaken German resistance in general, but also to accelerate the liberation of the French mainland as a whole. However, there was an equally vital, if not more urgent, logistical motivation. Allied operations in northern France faced a critical supply bottleneck. The port infrastructure captured in Normandy was limited or severely damaged. To sustain the rapid advance eastwards and into the German heartland, the Allies desperately needed large-capacity ports and, crucially, efficient supply routes that did not rely solely on the northern lines, which were under constant German threat. This is where the South came into play. The Mediterranean coast, with its deep water ports such as Toulon and especially Marseille, one of the largest ports in Europe, offered the ideal solution. Dragoon aimed to capture these port facilities intact as quickly as possible and secure navigation to the Rhone Valley, creating a massive logistical artery that could pump supplies and reinforcements directly to the fronts advancing from the north. It was, in essence, the other half of the Allied front to crush the German forces in France. In command of this vast and coordinated undertaking was General Jacob Devers, leading the newly formed U.S. 6th Army Group, composed of American forces, and, significantly, General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, at the head of the vital French Army, which included a large number of colonial troops and which would become the French First Army. For the Free French, this was an opportunity to play a leading role in the liberation of their homeland, a desire that de Lattre de Tassigny and his men held dear. The execution of the Dragoon therefore combined a massive amphibious assault on beaches selected for their tactical and strategic viability, the areas known as Alpha, Delta, and Camel, the landing of airborne troops to secure key points inland and disrupt German defenses, and the subsequent advance of ground forces. However, for any of these steps to be successful, there was one fundamental and indisputable prerequisite: superiority in the skies. Without it, ships would be vulnerable, paratroopers exposed, and ground troops pinned to the ground by the Luftwaffe. And it is at this point that the P-51 Mustang rises from a simple combat aircraft to an indispensable strategic element in the execution of Dragoon. For Operation Dragoon to have any chance of rapid success, for the landings not to become a bloody quagmire, and for the ground advance to gather pace, control of the skies over southern France was not an option. It was a fundamental necessity. And if any aircraft embodied this capability, it was the North American P-51 Mustang. Born out of a British need for a long-range fighter, the Mustang, particularly in versions equipped with the legendary Packard Merlin engine, became one of the most effective combat aircraft of the Second World War. Its streamlined fuselage and powerful V-12 engine gave it remarkable speed, exceeding 700 kilometers per hour in level flight. crucial for intercepting and dominating any aerial opposition the Luftwaffe could muster. But what really set it apart was its phenomenal range. With generous internal tanks and the ability to carry disposable auxiliary tanks under the wings, the P-51 could fly if necessary for over 1,000 kilometers, operate over a target for a considerable time, and return to its original position, base. This range was a game changer, allowing it to become the first Allied fighter to escort heavy bombers on deep raids over Germany. And in the context of Dragoon, it meant that P-51s could cover the entire area of operation, from naval convoys in the Mediterranean to troops advancing inland, equipped with 6 heavy caliber .50 Browning machine guns, formidable weapons for both air-to-air combat and ground attack. The Mustang was a stable and devastating firing platform. In addition to its machine guns, many variants could carry bombs or rockets, making a highly capable fighter bomber. This versatility was essential in the Dragoon environment, where missions range from pure air supremacy to direct support of troops on the ground and interdiction of enemy lines of communication. In practice, the P-51s that operated and supported Dragoon, many of them belonging to the Allied Provisional Tactical Air Force in the Mediterranean, acted as veritable flying shields. Their constant presence over naval convoys carrying invasion forces deterred significant attacks by the weakened but still dangerous Luftwaffe. In the airspace over southern France, they engaged and neutralized German opposition, ensuring that the invasion force could establish itself on the beachhead with a level of aerial security that was in stark contrast to other amphibious operations of the war. Furthermore, their ground attack capability allowed them to immediately begin degrading German infrastructure and troop concentrations in the area of operation, undermining the enemy's ability to respond in a coordinated and robust manner before they could launch significant counterattacks. The employment of the P-51 Mustang during Operation Dragoon was therefore intensive and multifaceted, shaped by the changing needs of the Allied advance and the German resistance. They were not just a presence in the skies. They were an active and aggressive tool, adapting their tactics to maximize impact. One of the most direct and brutal roles was close air support, flying at low altitude and in direct coordination with Allied ground units, such as the experienced American 3rd and 45th Infantry Divisions, which were among the first to land. Mustang pilots acted as artillery. They swooped down on German defensive positions, using their .50 caliber machine guns and, when equipped, bombs and rockets to neutralize heavy machine gun ambushes that held up the advancing infantry, destroy fortified positions, and, crucially, engage enemy armored vehicles, including the resisting Panzer IVs. This precise and responsive support was vital to the initial speed of the Allied advance off the beaches. In parallel, air interdiction missions were a cornerstone of Dragoon's strategy and a theater where the Mustang shone. Provence had a network of roads and railways that the Germans needed to use to move reinforcements or attempt an orderly withdrawal. The P-51s, with their long range, patrolled these routes relentlessly. They bombed railway and road bridges to collapse the infrastructure, strafe locomotives to immobilize trains, and attack convoys of trucks and armored vehicles on the move. The objective was simple: to isolate the battlefield, preventing German units in the area from receiving support or outside forces from arriving to reinforce them. This domino tactic, where the destruction of one link in the supply chain prevented the movement of dozens of others, profoundly disorganized the German defense and contributed immensely to the speed of the Allied advance. Finally, the Mustangs also played their classic role as bomber escort. Formations of B, 26 Marauders and other medium attack aircraft were sent to strike German logistical targets and headquarters in the rear, and the P-51s accompanied them. Their ability to engage and repel enemy fighters ensured that these bombers could deliver their destructive payloads with greater certainty, further undermining German response capabilities at the operational and tactical levels. The combination of this aggressive ground attack, effective interdiction, and ability to protect air and naval assets made the P-51 an invaluable component of Operation Dragoon. They were, in many ways, the aerial enablers that transformed a potentially costly landing into a rapid and decisive advance. The dominant presence and aggressive action of the P-51 Mustangs in the skies over southern France undeniably catalyzed the speed and success of Operation Dragoon, accelerating a German debacle that might otherwise have been slower and more costly, with Allied air supremacy established within days. A direct testament to the effectiveness of the fighters and the suppression of the Luftwaffe in the region, hundreds of strategic ground targets were neutralized or severely damaged. The constant threat from above, combined with the destruction of transportation infrastructure by the Mustang interdiction, paralyzed German mobility. This allowed Allied ground troops, consisting of American divisions and the Free French Army, to advance on the coast inland with surprising speed, facing resistance on the ground that was significantly weakened by the lack of reinforcements and supplies, and by the fear of air attack. The most tangible and immediate result of this speed was the lightning capture of the ports of Toulon and especially Marseille. The Allies were anxious that the Germans would completely destroy them, as they had done elsewhere in Europe. However, the combined pressure of the ground advance and the air action that prevented reinforcements and strategic and organized respites culminated in the capture of these vital ports in record time. Marseille, a logistical giant, fell less than 2 weeks after D-Day to Dragoon, ahead of many expectations. The rapid reactivation of these ports was a milestone, injecting a colossal volume of supplies and equipment into the Allied fronts, relieving the logistical bottleneck in the north, and being essential to sustaining the relentless advance towards Germany. But the impact of Operation Dragoon, enabled in large part by the air superiority guaranteed by the Mustangs, transcended the borders of southern France. By opening and consolidating a second front, the Allies forced the Wehrmacht into an untenable strategic dilemma. They had to divert resources and attention from the fight in the north, and in Italy to try to contain the advance across the Rhone. This dispersion of forces hastened the German collapse in both theaters. The speed of Dragoon's advance allowed, in mid-September 1944, the long-awaited and strategic rendezvous with the Allied forces advancing from Normandy near Dijon. This junction sealed the fate of the remaining German forces in western France and established a continuous front line from the Mediterranean to the English Channel, a giant and irreversible step towards ending the war in Europe. And at the epicenter of the successful operation, often underestimated in the general narrative of the war, were the P-51 Mustangs. They were not just machines. They were the embodiment of the ability to project air power where it was needed most, their wings cutting to the skies of Provence like razor-sharp blades, opening the way to freedom for a nation and altering the course of the campaign in Western Europe. The Second World War taught U.S. invaluable lessons about the nature of modern warfare. One of the most prominent is that victory on the ground is often won, or at least massively facilitated, by those who first conquer the skies. In Operation Dragoon, a theater of operations where logistics and speed of advance were crucial, the P-51 Mustang proved beyond doubt that air superiority is not just a tactical advantage, but a fundamental strategic differentiator, the fine line between resounding success and stagnation. The story of the P-51s and their pilots in the southern France campaign, the winged horses that brought freedom with the speed and roar of their Merlin engines, is, to this day, a rousing tribute not just to brilliant engineering or effective military strategy, but to the courage and determination of those who, flying high over Provence, helped change the destiny of a continent and, by extension, of humanity.